Haribo! Haribo! Haribo!
Hare Krishna. Can everyone hear properly?
It's a little unstable.
Okay, so gentlemen, that's you, over on that side. The ladies on the couch can stay, but the other ones, please come forward. Okay, did you offer it to Prabhupada?
Yes.
Stay here, stay here. That might fall.
Okay. How many of you were in Farmington Hills this past Wednesday? Yeah, I saw quite a few of you. How many of you were online watching the initiation ceremony this one? So just a small thing, because I just found this out myself. There was one devotee in New Vrindavan whose health had been deteriorating, and she needed a liver transplant. But in order to get one, you have to be to a certain fitness, and she wasn't meeting the mark to get to that point. And the family, so she was in kind of like this rehab place, they'd gone just a few days ago. And then the family decided just bring her back to New Vrindavan. Things were getting better. But before they get her back to New Vrindavan, so it was not today, but yesterday, in the evening, she left her body. And her name was Maharani Devi Dasi. And she was one of the many young women who at that time in New Vrindavan was just developing. And these women would go out for weeks, staying in a van and passing out books and different items to collect money to build New Vrindavan, you know, to build the temple there. You know, otherwise they were living in this little farmhouse, they were living in, it's hard to believe what they actually went through at that point, you know. And she went through so much, as did the others. Having to, in the winter, there wasn't hot water. The water was frozen, and they had to take an axe and chop the ice to get the water. So you can imagine the bathing was quite quick. You know. Anyways, she went through many austerities that many of us would not accept to go through to serve New Vrindavan. But in the later years, she was not so physically fit, and now she's left her body. So I request that we can remember her. Her name is Maharani Devi Dasi. She leaves behind her son, Vrindavanath, who is a disciple of Raghunath Swami, and her husband, who has an undercover name, which is Brother Peaceful. By undercover, I mean he's a musician, and he sings songs that he would write about Prabhupada, about Krishna, about New Vrindavan. And by using that name, he would go out into local situations and present these songs.
Just a second.
Switch out the microphone.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I'm deaf and this thing is deaf. Hare Krishna.
You just have to switch it on.
What was wrong with the other microphone?
Mic on off.
Thank you.
Mic on.
1, 2, 3.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
really sad because she was my neighbor, although as it is in the world sometimes, like, she was right behind me, like, I call the building the high rise, because I was the only building around, little cabin, and then they built these, apartments. So the apartments were like 2 floors and then a basement area, so I called that the high rise, and she was there, her son had arranged for her to have a place to stay. But I didn't see her hardly at all. She was kind of reclusive, and I was thinking, I'm just gonna go when I get back, I'm just gonna go over, because I knew there wouldn't be so much time, so formalities aside, I would just go. But she ran off to Prabhupada and Krishna before I could just go see her. So this wonderful initiation ceremony was on a particular day, not by Wednesday, but by September 17th. And there was some, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, auspiciousness connected to that day. So first it was Ekadashi, Indira Ekadashi, but it was also the day that Srila Prabhupada first stepped off the Jaladuta, the freighter that he came to America on, and he stepped ashore on American soil in Boston. And not only that, so that was 65, September 17th, 1965. 1959, September 19th, Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada accepted the Sacred Order of Sannyas. So this day, September 17th, when I was trying to figure out a day that would accommodate everybody, would accommodate Radhanath Swami, I got fixated on that day because of all the powerful advantages connected to Prabhupada that were there. And as such, I want to speak a bit about Srila Prabhupada's departure for preaching in the West. Om Magyarandasya Janana Sakalaya Chakshu Tam Yena Tasmai Sri Nirale Namaha. Now everybody knows Prabhupada's pranams, so please say them with me. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Vivekananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Asrata Sakarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. No. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya eva cha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So we could actually spend several days together week sitting and discussing the glories of Srila Prabhupada, how he began this movement, what it took for him to even arrive in America, which is what I will focus on tonight. But for us to have a connection with Prabhupada means for us as members of the Hare Krishna movement to have a connection with Krishna. He is our connector. We know that there are many, many saintly Vaishnavas, other Vaishnavas, and we respect all honorable Vaishnavas. But for us, Srila Prabhupada is our Acharya. He is our connection to Krishna. And as such, we follow his instructions. We read his books so that we don't become confused. I was really happy with the kirtan tonight. It was very nice. Simple, understandable, because sometimes people think it has to be all, and my God doesn't see, But they were really nice. And one other thing, you didn't do the Jai Gurudev thing. So I'll say why. It's not that you can't say Jai Gurudev, but you say that to your guru. Otherwise, you're saying Gurudev, and who's Gurudev? Especially during Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja. People start chanting Jai Gurudev, and I thought, wait a minute, this is Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja. And he explained to us Gurudev is actually, this Jai Gurudev is something that the Mayavadis, they will chant. However, if you, as a disciple, you can call your guru Gurudev, not a problem. But we don't chant it randomly in the temple, and especially during Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja. So I like to give information out, and I was so happy to see how that etiquette was followed today. How many here have read at least part of the Lilamrita, the life story of Prabhupada? Good, quite a number of you, thank you. And yeah, that's quite good. Sometimes people look at me with blinking eyes, like, what is she talking about? So you're getting nicely trained here, and I really appreciate Pandit Srivas has taken over, and before that you had Gopal Hari when we were down out in the cornfields. A little church in the corn. First time I went to that place, Dompriyan's driving, and I'm like, wait a minute, what's happening? Where are we? All I could see was cornfields. And I hadn't been told about that part, so I thought, oh my God, we're lost, And the GPS was not being that helpful, and I remember calling, I think we're lost. And he goes, well, where are you? I don't know, we're in cornfields. He goes, no, you're not lost. So it's wonderful how the congregation has increased, has developed, and surely it's going to continue doing so. And surely Krishna is going to see that you will get a larger, more suitable premise in the very near future. There's not a doubt about that. So when Srila Prabhupada, you know the story how he came to see his spiritual master, who at first he didn't know it was going to be his spiritual master. It was very reluctantly he went to meet this sadhu because a friend of his had insisted. And you know how friends can be very persuasive, right? Anybody here ever been persuaded to do something they thought they didn't want to do to please a friend? Yeah, in this case, his friend wanted to bring him to see a sadhu. And throughout, at that time his name was Abai, so throughout Abai's life, his father, who was of a saintly nature, had always brought sadhus into the house to feed them, let them speak. So he was familiar with meeting sadhus, but for the most part, he was never impressed by their character, by their temperament, or what they had to say. So here's his friend. I want you to meet this sadhu, and he's like, rolling his eyes. But as it turned out, to please his friend, he went. And I think most of you know the etiquette when you come in front of a saintly person. You make your pranams, you get down, you make obeisances. So, he, even if he thought the person wasn't so saintly, still, he knew the etiquette. So he made his obeisances. And he hadn't even got his head up off the ground, and he heard his soon-to-be spiritual master say, so you're an educated young man. Take this message of Mahaprabhu to the West and preach. So that was a bold assertion to somebody who he hadn't, they hadn't even met. And Abai had been known as the leader among his friends. We have a song in America, but I don't think any of you would know it. But in case you do, it's called The Leader of the Pack. It's you know that song?
Yeah.
It's a rock and roll type song, The Leader of the Pack. So Srila Prabhupada was the leader of his pack of friends. And he was really good to debate. So whenever they would have a debate, he would win. And he wasn't puffed up about it. It's just that, he was used to being the leader. So when Bhaktisiddhanta told him, you take this to the West and preach this message of Mahaprabhu, Srila Prabhupada spoke right up and he said, who is going to listen to us? Who will listen to anybody coming from India, which is a country subjugated? We're not a free country, we're under the thumb of the British. So, to which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati started to explain to him how this is transcendental knowledge, is not subjected to any type of material consideration, political or otherwise. And by the time he finished speaking, Srila Prabhupada, our Prabhupada, Abai, he was convinced. And in his own words, I heard him say this one time, he goes, for the first time, I was defeated, and I liked it very much. Because it wasn't a defeat of ego or just mundane knowledge, I know more than you. It was transcendental knowledge that was being transmitted. But it took some time for that to actually occur. But then came the time that Srila Prabhupada, he was like a lifetime in preparation. It came the time when he finally had the manuscript for the 3 volumes of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He had the money to print it, and he personally saw to the printing. In those days, paper was rationed. I don't know if you know, if you've ever experienced having to purchase gas on a ration. Arya and I was in India at a time when sugar was rationed. You could only get so the paper was rationed because there was a war going on, and every scrap of paper was used to make communications. They didn't have this type of communication, so paper, old-fashioned way. So he had got the paper, he purchased it, and he had personally gone over correcting, editing, and then he had to keep the printer on schedule so that the book would be finished. He had a deadline date, January 1965. How many of you in this room were born by January 65? How many of you here were born? Really, the rest of you are like little kids. We're just like these old ladies over here. I just had my birthday the day before Radhastami, and I turned 80, so yes, I was born before this, 1965. There was Prabhupada in India preparing to come to the West to save us. And there was people like me at that same time, just with our foolish little stupid lives, maybe looking for some truth to some of us, myself included, were, but we had no idea how it would look, what it would mean. So finally, by January 1965, he had the completed first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 parts. You know, now we have it in one large volume, but they had 3 volumes. And now he had his, vision set on the West because he felt, I have something to offer, as opposed to coming, empty-handed. Had something concrete to offer. And it's interesting because he had been printing small pamphlets. He had been printing, or he hadn't even printed. He would just be talking, about Krishna, about Lord Chaitanya. But he had some little small pamphlets. And one day he met a person in Delhi, and the person said, okay, very good, but people just throw it away. It's like, it was like newspaper type of thing, You should print books. And actually, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had told him at one point, if you get money, print books. So it looked like Krishna was, nudging him. This is how you go to the West with books, And now he had that first canto of the Bhagavatam. And it had actually, by that point, in more than 40 years since Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had asked the young Grihastha, because when Prabhupada met his guru, he was a young, newly married, or fairly newly married, he had a son already, but he was, a young householder when he was first asked to speak Krishna consciousness in the West. And initially, it just seemed like, what? Impossible. But that obstacle now had been removed for 10 years because he had taken the sannyas ashram. Now, how many here knows meaning, or better, let me flip it the other way. How many don't know what the meaning of sannyas ashram is? I mean, you're all clear? Like, if I asked you, take sannyas, what would you say? No. Yeah, that's probably what most people would say. Nowadays, good old Kali Yuga would say, what are you talking about? They wouldn't even understand. But just to make sure, a sannyasi is one who's given up all worldly life to serve Krishna. So it's known as the renounced order. Just like in our churches, sometimes we have, like in the Catholic Church and other Greek Orthodox, they have priests. And all they do is serve the church. So Prabhupada was reminiscing how he had planned to go to America, and generally he was explaining that when anybody would leave India, they would go to London. Like Prabhupada sent us to London, but that was after he'd already established a mission in America. So they'd go to London, but Prabhupada said he didn't want to go to London. He was thinking how to get to New York. His words, I was scheming, how to get to New York. Shall I go this way? Shall I go through Tokyo? Which way? Which way is cheaper? That's how he was thinking. But he was always targeting New York. And he said sometimes he was even dreaming that he had arrived in New York. When we were sent to London, Srila Prabhupada was recounting how his Guru Maharaj had sent disciples, had even financed them, and he didn't accomplish anything. So he said, I thought, if I'm to fail, let it be somewhere else. So at one point, he met Mr. Agarwal, who was a mature business person. This was when he was going around trying to pass out his, his pamphlets and things. And he mentioned in passing, as he would do practically to everybody, that he wanted to go to the West and preach. So even though Mr. Agarwal had only known Prabhupada for just a few minutes, like they just met, like we, have a little exchange. If you've ever done book distribution, you know what it's like. You just have a little exchange and then you move on. So that little exchange, But to his surprise, Mr. Agarwal volunteered to get him a sponsor to go to America. That was a key part of in those days. But it turned out he had a son who was living in Butler, Pennsylvania. How many of you have visited Butler, Pennsylvania? Well, next week, coming on the 24th, there is a celebration of the 60th year of Prabhupada's arrival in America at Butler, Pennsylvania. I don't know how many of you can make it. It's a bit of a drive, but just letting you know in case it happens. So he sent the sponsorship, and Prabhupada knew he couldn't just simply keep thinking or dreaming about, he needed to get some money to make that move. So in March of 1965, he went to Bombay and he was attempting to sell his now complete books. And he wasn't staying at a nice hotel. He was staying at a free dharamshala. So, how many here have ever even stayed in a dharamshala? A free one? The hands go. You once stayed at a free one? Free means you didn't pay.
Yeah, at Tirupati, like,
Yeah.
but they are like not the older ones, the newer ones.
Well, I have to say I stayed in many different free dharamshalas, so I can reliably tell you what that was like. Here we're sitting nice and comfortably. There's something on the floor. There's a couch if someone needs it. Basically, the dharamshalas were like cement buildings, cement floor, a window somewhere, and if you're lucky, a little spigot for water to come out of. It wouldn't be a bathroom. You would have to bring your own bucket. And there was another little cement room where you could, rinse yourself off with. It wasn't, something that was excessively comfortable, but it was free. And Srila Prabhupada at that time had no money. And if he got money, it was being put in to print more books. So the name of the dharamshala was called Prem Kutir. But he had a difficulty finding customers. By that time in India, there was already a little shift in the pious mood of the population. But he met a librarian at this Jai Hind college, and he purchased the books for the college. And then he was very impressed, and he was escorting Prabhupada to a few outlets, but no success. Religious literature was not high on the priority list. So it's really interesting when you think about that, because Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita remains one of the top-selling Bhagavad Gitas in the world now, in a world where religious books are not really priority. Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita remains top of the list. So, he was trying, he went back to Delhi. He wasn't working out in Bombay. He went back to Delhi. And he was looking for whatever opportunity might arise. And then he got a letter from the Ministry of External Affairs. So getting in and out of India in those days, especially getting out of India if you were an Indian, was a very complicated process. Like now you get your passport, you get your ticket, and haribo. But you had to go through different hoops and hurdles. So you had to get this no objection certificate. So suddenly there it was. And Prabhupada was surprised, but I didn't. He hadn't, made the application, so he asked them can you show me? He wanted to see how did I get this? And there it was, the statutory declaration form, and it was signed by Mr. Gopal Agarwal of Butler, Pennsylvania, the son of the man he had met. And he said, he solemnly declared he would bear the expense of Bhaktivedanta Swami during his stay in America, and the stay would be from 1 to 3 months. So Gopal Agarwal had done this just to please his father. He knew nothing about, Prabhupada. It was a formality, Like how many here would do something like that just because your dad asked you to do it? Things have changed a bit, So he had, in order for him to get that sponsorship, Gopal had to get a form from the Indian consulate in New York. He had to obtain a statement from his employer certifying his monthly salary. He had to get a letter from his bank showing his balance as of April 1965, and then it had to get notarized. So it had been stamped and approved in New York and then sent to Delhi, and now A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami had a sponsor. But he still needed a passport, he needed a visa, he needed a P form, and most of all, he needed travel fare. But by June 10th, he had his passport, so this was like, this here was in April, and by June 10th, he had his passport. And in the address, he had put in Radha Krishna Temple in Chippiwada, which is a part of Delhi. Who's been there? Have you been there? No. So all the places related to Prabhupada have now been one way or another secured by ISKCON or supported by ISKCON. So Chippiwada was like a falling apart temple, and it's now a wonderful place of pilgrimage. You'd all be welcome to go there and see this place where Prabhupada spent time before he came here. So that was his address, and his father's name, Gaur Mohan Dey. And then he asked Krishna Pandit, who had been, showing around, helping a bit. He asked him, "Could you pay for my going abroad?" But then Krishna Pandit refused. The main reason he refused because he thought it was against Hindu principles for a sadhu to go abroad. But secondary was, it was very expensive. But he had his passport, he had the sponsorship papers, so again he went to Bombay. This time he was determined to get a ticket, somehow get a passage. And he went again to see Srimati Sumati Morarji, who was the owner of the East India Steamship Company. She was quite this is going back at a time when women were not prominent in business world. She began her work at the age of 20, when her father left his body. So she was quite a capable lady. So, he showed the sponsorship papers to her secretary. His name was Mr. Choksi. And he went to Srimati Morarji and the Swami from Vrindavan is back. And he's published his book on your donation because she had given him money to print the Bhagavatam. Now he has a sponsor and he wants to go to America and he wants you to send him on a Scindia ship. No, the Swami's too old to go to the United States and expect to accomplish anything. So then he goes and he tells that in Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, he was listening, and this man Choksi goes, he was listening with disapproval. So she wanted him to stay in India. Why go to the States? He stayed in India and complete the Bhagavatam, finish the job. But he was fixed on going, and he told Choksi he should convince her. And he was coaching him what to say and how to say it. But then again, she said, no, the Swami's not healthy, it would be too cold there, he might not even come back. And she doubted whether he'd even be able to accomplish anything there. It's like, how many of you would just walk into the next city over? Just would take, go to the next city over without anything and start a Hare Krishna center. He's going to another continent. So, she was saying, people in America are not so cooperative. They probably won't even listen to him. So Srila Prabhupada got a little exasperated and he demanded a personal interview, and it was granted. So he was gray-haired, determined Bhaktivedanta Swami, and he presented his very emphatic request: please give me one ticket. And Srimati Maharaji was concerned. She goes, Swamiji, you are so old. You're taking this responsibility. Do you think it's all right? And then he was saying, no. And he was lifting his hand as if to reassure a doubting daughter. And he goes, it will be all right. And then she counted, well, you know what my secretaries think? They say Swamiji is going to die there alone. And then Prabhupada made a very dismissive face, like, and she gave him the ticket. All right, go get your P form, and I'll make an arrangement to send you by our ship. So a P form, this was another necessity at that time for an Indian national who wanted to leave the country. And it was a certificate given by the State Bank of India. I don't even know if that bank's still in existence. Okay, good for them. That's why they're still in existence. So it certified that the person had no excessive debts in India. They're cleared by the bank. And that would take a little while to obtain. And he also didn't yet have his visa. So he had to pursue these government permission in Bombay, but he had no place to stay. So Mrs. Morarji agreed to let him reside at the Scindia Colony. The Scindia Colony was a compound of apartments for employees of the Scindia Steamship Company. So he was staying just in a small, unfurnished apartment with only his little trunk, and he had a typewriter. Because the Bhagavatam first canto was done, didn't mean that was the end of his efforts, So the resident Scindia employees, they all knew that Mrs. Morarji was sending him to the West, and so they became a little interested. And they were also like, you're so old, you're going to preach? But they could see he was a special sadhu, and he was also a scholar. They could see this. And then they heard he was taking hundreds of copies, actually 200 copies of his books with him, but he had no money. That was his wealth, were these books. But it became kind of like a little celebrity in this India colony, and people started to visit him. They'd bring some chawls, some sabji, some fruit. And then it was like they'd bring so much he couldn't eat it all, so he mentioned this to Minister Choksi. And he was advised, just accept it, because they're giving to you, just accept it, and then you can distribute to the children. I had an experience with Srila Prabhupada on this point. It's a matter of etiquette. He was saying, they're offering it to him. Why? Because he's a sadhu, a Brahmin. So it was not right if he would, if he would not accept it. So one time when we were first in India, people were kind of fascinated by the dancing white elephants, as we were kind of known as. How many of you have read Giriraj Swami's book, Prabhupada Going to India? 1, 2, 3, good. It talks a bit about that point there, about the dancing white elephants. So people would give us stuff, and we were kind of traveling very light. Like I had this, now my daughter was a toddler. She was 6 weeks old when we went to England. Now we're, she's about 3 years old. And I had one suitcase in the hand, and the other arm was for my daughter. So I just couldn't take a lot. I had a little shoulder bag. And I remember we were at this program, and the gentleman was into, I guess, textiles, and he was handing everybody something like a gumcha, from his textile mill. And I refused. And Prabhupada was there, and it was like one of these, so fast. He jumps up, he says, and he's no, you must accept, and he turns to the man, no, she did not, she doesn't understand. You must accept. And he goes, she didn't understand. And then explain to me, you're Brahmin, they're giving to you as a Brahmin, you cannot refuse. You know? So that was a lesson to be learned at that time. And Mr. Choksi was indirectly giving the same lesson to Prabhupada, you have to accept. So Prabhupada's apartment had kind of a roofed-in veranda, and one of the Cindy office workers and his wife mentioned that every time they came his way, he would be writing or chanting. And the wife would ask, Swamiji, what are you writing? And one day he gave her 2 books, and he goes, child, she was a young lady, woman, child, if you read this book, you will understand. So they would have discourses and people would come, but his main concern was every day he would go out trying to get his visa and his P form as quickly as possible, selling his book, seeking contacts, seeking supporters for future Bhagavatam publishing, because first canto, but it was 12 cantos, right? And then this Mr. Narakajan, he would go through the dictionary, to the telephone dictionary, you know, like, what's a telephone directory, and he'd pick out the names of wealthy professional men who he knew were Vaishnavas, and maybe they would assist. And sometimes, you know, Prabhupada would be out all day long, and he'd come back, and he would just sit down. You know, he'd be sitting on the windowsill. And one time, Swamiji, did you have a good day? Did you mean? He just said, not much today. I didn't get much. It's depressing. But tomorrow, Krishna will give me more details. And he would sit quietly. And then they would describe. And then after 10 minutes, he would be up in his chair and he'd be writing again. You know. And she was thinking, how is it? He was so exhausted. He'd been out all day. So exhausted. And then the next moment, totally rejuvenated. And not only that, he had to walk for 2 kilometers to get to where he was going, to get into town, because he didn't have the money to put it down on a bus. All the money, whatever he got, was going towards publication. So he wasn't defeated. He didn't speak about discouragement. And her friends would come for discourse. They'd give namaskar and some fruits, you know. And his temperament was described as very adjustable and homely. You know, his friends would offer a few rupees, and he'd say, all right, it will help, you know. So then he had a page printed. It was entitled My Mission. And he would show it to influential men in order to get further financing for the Bhagavatam. So I'm telling you all this to get some idea of the endeavors that were being made by Srila Prabhupada in order to come here and get to the point where he would actually have a mission, visible mission, and that all of us would be the beneficiaries. You know, if he had gotten discouraged and stopped, we wouldn't be here today together, you know? So, in the meantime, he had the backing of Scindia, got his sponsorship. He got his visa July 28, 1965. But that P form was going slowly. And it actually threatened to be a last-minute insurmountable obstacle. So he went himself to the Bank of India. He had applied for the P-form sanction, but no sanction was coming. So the head officer told him, Swamiji, you're being sponsored by a private man, so we cannot accept. If you're invited by some institution, then we could consider. But you're invited by a private man for 1 month. After 1 month, if you're in difficulty, there would be so many obstacles. But Prabhupada was ready. He had everything else ready. So he said, what have you done? And so he told what have you done? And the man said, I have decided not to sanction your P form. And Srila Prabhupada became, no, don't do this. Send me to your superior. It should not be like this. He was so adamant. He was so courageous. So he went to, he got the file, sent his file to the chief, there was like chief official of foreign exchange. He's considered a supreme man in the State Bank of India. And he said to the secretary, do you have such and such a file? Put it to Mr. Rao. I want to see him. And the secretary agreed. So he's sitting there and he's waiting. And then Mr. Rao personally came and said, Swamiji, I have passed your case. Don't worry. So now it was ready to go. And he had another request, got 500 copies of a small pamphlet containing the 8 verses of Shastastakam written by Lord Chaitanya, and included an advertisement for the Srimad Bhagavatam in context of an advertisement for this India steamship company. So Mrs. Morarji had finally scheduled a place for him on one of her ships. And that ship was the Jaladuta. And the reason it took so long was she wanted to make sure that he would be under the care of complimentary hot, warm Indian weather. He was heading to New York, where things could be pretty intensely cold. So then he took him to the station. He took a train to Calcutta, and he arrived in Calcutta 2 weeks before the departure. And even though he had lived practically his entire life in the city, he's coming back now as a sannyas. He had nothing, and he had nowhere to stay. He had written this beautiful poem, Vrindavan Bhajan. And in that poem, there's one very poignant, very heart-touching verse. I have my wife, sons, daughters, grandsons, everything. But I have no money, so they're a fruitless glory. Although in this city he had been nurtured as a child, those early days, they were now gone. So he writes, where have my loving mother and father gone? Where have they gone now? And where are all my elders who were my own folks? Who will give me news of them? Tell me, who? All that is left of this family is a list of names. Please consider this point. You all have your families. You have your current families. You've got your past families, your future families. And at one point, all that will be left is a list of names. So out of the hundreds of people in Calcutta that Srila Prabhupada knew, he chose to call upon Shishir Bhattacharya. So Shishir Bhattacharya, he was a very flamboyant kirtan singer. I think we have a few flamboyant kirtan singers now in ISKCON, colorful folks. And he'd met him just a year ago at the governor's house in Lucknow. So Mr. Bhattacharya wasn't a relative, he wasn't a disciple, wasn't even a close friend, but he was willing to help. And Prabhupada called at his place and informed him he would be leaving in a few days and he needed a place to stay. And he would like to give some lectures. So Bhattacharya immediately, he began to arrange private meetings at friends' homes, and they would go, he would sing, and Bhaktivedanta Swami would speak. So a week before his departure, another thing is he took him around to different newspapers. Because he thought, this is newsworthy. Here's his Swami, old agent Swami's going. And none of the big papers were kind of indifferent. But there was one smaller Bengali newspaper, and that paper agreed to print a small article with a Swamiji's picture, and it said, Bhaktivedanta Swami will be leaving, it gave the date, on such and such a date. So a week before his departure, on August 6th, 1965, he traveled to nearby Mayapur to visit the Samadhi of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, his guru, and take his blessings. And then he went to Srivasangam. And this was interesting because he used to go there as a grihast, and he would sit in the back of the darshan mandap and chant. And the pujari there would observe this. And he would see how intensely, he's not a grihast, intensely chanting. So now he's there in the dress of a sannyas. And he hadn't been there for some time, so he was not immediately recognized by the pujari. But then he realized, by the intensity of the chanting, this was that same person who had been coming. And he went up to him, and Prabhupada said, please give me your blessings. He's asking for the blessings of this person. My Guru Maharaj has given me an impossible task. He's sending me to the West to preach about Radha and Krishna because we're suffering there for lack of knowledge about Radha and Krishna. So then he returned to Calcutta, and they finished up their final speaking engagements and kirtans, and then they hired a taxi, and on the day of departure, Prabhupada took stock of his meager personal possessions. A suitcase, not even a great big suitcase, no roller on it, had an umbrella, and a supply of dry cereal, a few rotis that were recently purchased, and a warm overcoat. And he had this cereal because he didn't know what he would be able to find to eat in America. Perhaps he thought there would only be meat. So he said he was prepared to live on boiled potatoes and cereal, if he had to do that. In his main baggage, the trunks of his books were handled separately by the India cargo, so that 200 3-volume sets of the Bhagavatam, and he'd think of that, and it just gave him confidence. So the day came to depart, and he needed that confidence. He was making a momentous break with his previous life. He was dangerously old. I mean, for that time and from India, he was just about to turn 70. And he wasn't in strong health. So to be poor and unknown in India was one thing, but even in the Kali Yuga days, when India's leaders were rejecting the Vedic culture and imitating the West, still it was India, and it still had remnants of the Vedic civilization. So in that way, as a sannyasi, he had been able to see millionaires, governors, prime ministers simply showing up at the door and waiting. But sannyas still hold respect. The Srimad Bhagavatam is respected, the Gita was respected. But in America, it wouldn't be different. He would be no one, he'd be a foreigner. There was no tradition of sadhus, there were no temples, no free ashrams. But when he thought of the books that he was bringing, the thought of this beautiful transcendental knowledge in English, he would become very confident. And when he met someone in America, he would give him the flyer, Srimad Bhagavatam, India's message of peace and goodwill. So on August 13th, it was a few days before Janmashtami, and the next day, after Janmashtami, would have been his 69th birthday. So during the last days, he'd been in Vrindavan for Janmashtami, and many Vrindavan residents, they never leave Vrindavan. They come there, they're old, they're at peace, and they take informal vows. They will never leave Vrindavan. The Vaishnava sadhus and the widows, they won't even go to Mathura, because they considered that to die in Vrindavan was a perfection of life. So the Hindu tradition was that sannyasis should never leave the shores of Bharatvarsa. So crossing the ocean to the land of Maleti was just like, unheard of. You just didn't do that. But beyond all of that was the desire of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and his desire was not different from that of Lord Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself, had predicted, he had declared that the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra would be known in every town and village in the world. Even this little place in Indiana. So he took the taxi to the Calcutta port. There were a few friends and admirers and his son Vrindavan Day. And he wrote in his diary, today at 9 a.m. I embarked on an MV Jaladuta. He was carrying a Bengali copy of the Shitadi Shaitamrita, which he intended to read during the journey, during the crossing. Somehow he would come on board. And he checked all the essentials. When you go to the airport, you sit there and you look 25 times at your ticket. You look 25 times at your passport. But he just, looked, he checked the ticket, the passport, the visa, P form, sponsor's address. Finally, it was happening. And Prabhupada commented, with what great difficulty I got out of the country. Some way or other, by Krishna's grace, I got out so that I could spread Krishna consciousness movement all over the world. And this was the glorious beginning. Innocuous. It wasn't big fanfare. There was hardly anyone to see him off, and certainly no one to meet him on the other side. And yet, by taking that step, it was the beginning of the birth of the Hare Krishna movement. And I want to make a small comment about the Jaladuta, the cargo ship. Because I think now, how many of you ever seen a cargo ship? You've gone to, they're big monstrous ships, right? They're huge. And he actually had nice quarters, by the way, because he had the quarters of the owner, which was Srimati Murarji, when she would travel. So she had like a suite. And there was about 7 windows, 2 on the port side and then on the other side. And there was a largish room where you could pull a curtain and have 2 rooms. And there was, a little place where you could cook. So, not actually a kitchen, but just a little place you could cook. So, still, it was a cargo ship. And I heard, at one point, they were going to dismantle, scrap it. So I thought, I'd like to see that before it disappears. So I went and I heard it was in the Bombay harbor. I was in Bombay, I went down to the shipyard. And I see all these massive freighters, and I'm looking up, trying to find Jaladuta. And I see some fellow, God, Jaladuta, where's Jaladuta? He points down, and I'm looking up, he points down. And there I saw this impossibly small, elegant looking nonetheless, but Jaladuta. I'm looking at that ship and I'm thinking, my God, I wouldn't even go outside the harbor, in that little, like a toy ship. And Prabhupada set sail and went 6 seas and oceans. He crossed the Suez Canal, he crossed the Atlantic. How brave he was, seriously. For thousands of years, Krishna Bhakti had only been known in India, not outside. And the only swamis to have reached America had been non-devotee Mahavadi impersonalists. And now for the first time, Krishna was sending Bhaktivedanta Swami as his personal emissary. In fact, in Butler, Pennsylvania, they wrote an article about him. And they said, Bhakti Yoga Ambassador to the West. That's how the entire. So, I don't know what your time frame is here.
Another 10 minutes or so, and then we can do Q&A. Another 10 minutes, and then we can do Q&A.
Or maybe if somebody has some questions they want to present. Or
We'll do some of that.
maybe they're all the same. And does anybody have any questions? Yeah. How many are interested in Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada? Okay, so out of you who are interested, do you have some questions about him, or do you have something that really sticks in your heart, and you could share that?
A comment and a question.
So thank you, first of all, for, this was enthralling. This was pure nectar. Learning more and more about Srila Prabhupada. As we advance in ISKCON, years like that, how best do you think we can serve Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission? Would you like to share a little bit more about specifically that? Because we hear about that from multiple sources, but you being so close to him, we would absolutely love to engage more on that.
So on a personal level, each one of you have to make your commitment of service to Guru and Krishna. Without a guru, you will be like a leaf blowing in the wind. You'll be like a ship adrift at sea without a captain or an anchor. You may not reach your destination. So it is an essential ingredient of spiritual life that one has a guru, a teacher. Just like I was explaining this at the initiation. When I was 13 years old, I had a very liberal grandmother, so she taught me how to drive. Now, she wasn't living in a city. It was in California, in Marin County. It was a little town called Bolinas. And it was at the end of a little peninsula. It was a little town, and so it wasn't like, there wasn't stop signs, there wasn't stop lights. There weren't policemen, every once in a while during the week there was a police from the other neighbor, like some distance away, and he would maybe drive around, see everything was okay. So I knew how to drive. But at 13, you couldn't get a driver's license, so I was not legal on the road. It wasn't until I got my driver's license that I could legally drive. I was connected, right? So in the same way, you may be performing different acts of devotional service according to your mind, according to your thoughts, but without the instructions and connection of a guru, there will be no fructification. And it's in the Nectar of Devotion, it explains this in the introduction. Very important point. You need to get legal on the path of devotion. Get your spiritual license, which happens during the connection with the Guru, which is called initiation. So that's one point. And if you're considering yourself a member of ISKCON, part of ISKCON, then the person you need to follow is Srila Prabhupada. His books are here, You need to not just read them. One time Prabhupada was speaking with some disciples, two in particular, Buddhimanta and Tamal Krishna Goswami. And he asked, something about a particular verse, and they both kind of looked at each other. So you could tell they actually didn't, know the verse or they hadn't memorized it. They told them, this, you have to read the books. Oh, we're reading the books. No, you have to not just read, you have to study. You have to study the books. And he said, just like a lawyer will study the law books so that they can defeat the opponent. So we have to study carefully Prabhupada's books if we are going to be successful in preaching and spreading Krishna consciousness, which is our business. The Hare Krishna movement, make no mistake, it's a preaching and teaching movement. It's not a sentimental movement for, socializing. I mean, socializing is there through spiritual activities, through different, like we're doing Rath Yatra tomorrow in Mason, Ohio, only 2 hours away, please come. And it's great fun, very nice social event. But we need to have a deep understanding and commitment. And that comes through understanding the knowledge of Krishna consciousness presented in Prabhupada's books and through the connectivity of the Guru. So this studying, so Prabhupada says, like the lawyer will study the law books, he knows them chapter and verse. We may not be to that caliber that we can actually, I know devotees who have memorized the Bhagavad Gita, not just the Sanskrit. They know the English, they know the purports. One of those devotees in New Vrindavan, Ananda Vidya, he cares for the cows, he says his wife will lead a gopi. Who would think that cowherd boy could rap off the Gita one verse after the other and adequately explain it? But before he became a cowherd boy, he was a Sankirtan, means he was traveling in a van and distributing Prabhupada's books. So every day he'd read, and then at night he liked to play guitar. He would chant the verses in Sanskrit to the music of his guitar, and that way he learned the entire Gita. So we may not be on that, level, but surely Krishna gives you intelligence. He says he does. You have to believe it, because Krishna's not giving empty promises. He's not giving you, fluff. He's giving you real spiritual information and knowledge to help you become a perfect person in this life. So read Srila Prabhupada's books. When they were he was first translating, and then the people would be doing the manuscripts typing. So those persons were feeling extremely fortunate, and they were the first ones to read the translations. So they would tell somebody else, and the word would get out really quickly. So in the same way, if you read something, tell someone else about it, talk about it. This is called sadhusanga. Coming together, not just for a good time, Hari Bol, and something to eat, but actually talking about Krishna and fanning that little spark within your heart so that it will grow brighter and brighter, and so that your attention will become more and more fixed on Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much for that very wonderful and inspiring lecture. So as you were talking, I was just thinking that Srila Prabhupada was very absorbed in Krishna consciousness through all these different situations. He was looking at Krishna's mercy, whether he made all those sacrifices to come to America, and once the movement was established, and there was so much glory that came, but he was always looking at Krishna's mercy. One of the things I was really wanted to know about, since you had his personal association, was although he was so fixed, but how could he make such nice connections and exchanges with all those people that came along in his life, like those who were not on that. I mean, of course, with devotees, he would have those spiritual discussions, but those like Mrs. Raji and all these people, how did he have those genuine bonds and connections so quickly?
Actually, Srimati Maharaja wasn't just a owner and the CEO of, she was also, she was a bhakta. She was in the Sampradaya of Ballavacharya, you know. But she asked Prabhupada at one point when he was staying at that colony, I mentioned this, India's colony, she wanted him to read Bhagavatam, and she'd send a card to him, and he would come and read Bhagavatam. And it wasn't for entertainment, she was deeply interested, and he was giving the purports, you know, speaking the verse and then giving his purports. In other words, what are these purports? They're a highlight. They're helping us because we're so dull. We're calling you the people. You know, we're not the six Goswami material. You know, the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. You know, but we're fortunate people. And even sometimes it's like, okay, you're fortunate. Why am I fortunate? You don't know, you know. But we are, you are. All of us are. Just for having come in contact with the holy name as Chaitanya has wrought. And it takes some effort, and it takes a determination. It's just not going to fall on our laps. And we see how Srila Prabhupada, yes, he struggled. And he was a pure devotee. You know, we're having to fight our senses and our minds and our families and our relatives and our bosses, you know. We have so many pushbacks. You also have that in different ways. There's one time he was writing in a letter to a friend in India. He was in New York in an office that had he didn't even have a proper place to stay, so he's in a small room without any windows, without a bathroom. To go to the bathroom, you have to go out in the hallway, take a bath, you have to go to a public bath house, you have to go somewhere else to cook, to eat. So he's staying in there, doing his typing, and he was alone. And he writes to his friend, you know, sometimes I can't even sleep at night due to hunger. You know, just for me to think of that. And there I was on the other continent, you know, not knowing about him, not knowing my eternal spiritual master was on the same continent as I was, doing my stupid little foolish, you know, American woman life. You know, people were not understanding what it was to respect a sadhu, a saintly person. You know, we were the American mindset, and maybe some of your mindsets now. How many of you were born in America? You know, like a number of you, right? Or you've been here for a number of years by now. You even may have American citizenship. But the values of spiritual life are directly opposite material life. They're polar opposites. So we have to be determined, as was Srila Prabhupada. Nobody thought it was a great idea for him to come here. At every step he was discouraged, and then even when he got here, it didn't suddenly smooth out at all. It just struggled. While he was in that windowless room, there was a big blackout. It was like a famous blackout. It was in '66. And everything went out. It was a big, between Canada and the eastern seaboard. A main, what do you call those, power stations that went out because we were sharing power. And so the person who was the owner of the office, he sent a person to check on, just check on his guest. And when that guest got there, because there was no electricity, he didn't have a flashlight, he didn't have a candle, he knocks on the door, and he saw Prabhupada was just simply chanting, sitting there in the pitch dark, and he brought him a candle, he brought him some fruit. Prabhupada wasn't, like a lot of people were really freaking out. Losing electricity in New York City is no small inconvenience, But his confidence in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his determination to spread his glories kept him going. His determination to fulfill the order of his spiritual master kept him going. Sometimes people say he was focused. No, that's nonsense. Focus means you've got other distractions. I'll just focus on this. No, he was absorbed, fully absorbed in Krishna. There was no other distraction. Distractions are there, but he wasn't buying into them. But for us, we have to just push on, become convinced. Because if you're not convinced, you're not going to be able to really move forward. So 3 things: determination, and you have to have some enthusiasm, mudra, and patience. And Prabhupada said if even one of those 3 things are missing, then there won't be success. Even for material life, these points must be there to speak of spiritual life. The determination, the enthusiasm, and the patience. Hi Krishna, how are you?
So,
Would you mind?
So, Malati, my question is, why did Prabhupada started ISKCON? There was a Guru Parampara, Vaishnava Gaudiya Math already established. So, a lot of people now think that the Hare Krishna movement started after ISKCON was established, but it has been going on for more than 500 years. So, can you please tell why the
So your
ISKCON?
question is, why did he start ISKCON?
Yes.
He didn't come here to start ISKCON. However, he found no one willing to help. No one wanted to leave India. In fact, he left bravely to fulfill the order of the saintly Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But Lord Chaitanya, Krishna himself said, my name will be chanted in every town and village. How is it going to happen unless somebody left India and carried the message? And that was Srila Prabhupada. And before he left, he was writing letters. He was speaking to different friends, acquaintances, other swamis. Come. These people are suffering. You preach. I'll take care of everything. Just come and help and preach. Nobody bothered. And without an identity, just somebody on a street corner, there had to be a place. There had to be, if you will, an institution where you could guide people. That would be a place just like the temple, What is a temple? Do we need a temple? Yeah, we actually do. We need a place for people to come in and sit down and get together. We can do it like this in people's homes, and definitely that should continue. But the temple is a little special, right? You don't, the temple is completely focused on Krishna. That's what it's about. When we're in our homes, it's wonderful, and this home is like a temple. That's why they say in Vrindavan there's thousands of temples, because every home is like a temple. We'd like to have thousands of temples in Indiana, every home a temple. But having that temple, a place where we can all go and put aside some of our worries and come together and chant the holy name, have kirtan, to hear some Gita or Bhagavatam, to celebrate big festivals. It's like Janmashtami. How many had a wonderful celebration of Janmashtami here, right? You can do it in your home for sure, but when you come together, it's just a very special situation. It transports you to the spiritual world. So he started ISKCON because there had to be a place to come together. There had to be an identity. Otherwise, like scattering the leaves in the wind, we wanted to all come together. There's that saying, Prabhupada built a house the whole world could live in. We haven't actually really figured out if he actually said that. We don't think he said it, and we don't know who said it. But it's a nice consideration. So we're part of that world. We're part of that house. This house is part of that house, and all of our temples are part of the house that the whole world can live in. Do we need that?
Thank you, Mataji.
And I want to say to the ladies also that Srila Prabhupada was so wonderful how he engaged equally the ladies, the men and the women. At that point, because we were so young, he'd say boys and girls. But we were immediately accepted, we were immediately embraced, we were immediately engaged. I don't see that book, but maybe you should get it.
Bond of Love.
The Bond of Love. Srila Prabhupada and his daughters. And there are many testimonies in this book how Srila Prabhupada engaged us. And now more than ever, there's just more and more that can be done in the matter of spreading Krishna consciousness. Actually, Srila Prabhupada told one person, Tamal Krishna, he goes, actually, if I had not engaged the ladies, this movement would not have gotten off the ground.
How did you first get connected?
How did I first get connected? Well, actually, I'm looking to see if you have the first canto here. I'm not even seeing one.
First canto Bhagavatam.
Anyways, just to make a, as they say, the long story short, I was introduced, myself and my boyfriend, who became my husband, we were introduced by a college friend of his to the Srimad Bhagavatam. This person had become initiated and married, and his wife. They were in the first initiation, which was in September of 1967, 66, yeah. So here you see this beautiful Bhagavatam. Now they have the Radha and Krishna here, but underneath you see the picture that was on the first editions. So we were having dinner, and it had already been kind of interesting because they'd gone to New York and then they wrote back, and his girlfriend went. And in those days, hippie Sampradaya did not believe in marriage, I didn't think that was something so necessary. But he wrote back and said, he was getting married, they were getting married. We were a little shocked, and then a Swami, they were getting married. And by that point, we had met a few Swamis from New York, and from India, none of which had impressed us much. So we were a little surprised that, wow, they met a Swami, and they're getting married. And then they came back to the West Coast, and we met them on the top of a mountain. We were staying on the top of a mountain as employees of the federal government at the time, looking out for fires. So, first prasadam occurred there. His wife was rolling out some little dough balls, putting them on our wood stove, and they were puffing up, and it looked really mystical. Bodies. First Krishna prasadam. And then he told us, by the way, our names, we have new names. So I'm thinking, oh my God, they met a Swami, they got married, now they have new names, what's next? They explained they were vegetarian, and in the 60s, the early 60s, vegetarianism was, this is not a joke, it was looked upon like you might be a communist or something. It was not accepted in mainstream society. Now you can go to Kroger's, you can go anywhere, to Myers, you can go anywhere and get anything plant-based. Now we don't even call it vegetarian, plant-based, you know. But at those days, not at all. So, you know, now they're married, they're initiated, got new names, they're vegetarians. And he says, you know, after dinner, I'd like to show you something. And he pulled out the first volume of the Bhagavatam. And then I saw this picture of a man with blue skin lying on a snake in an looks like an ocean with a flower growing out of his navel, and on the top of that flower was another person with blue skin, but this one had 4 heads. I'm just like, what is this? What is this? Who is this? And Mukunda said, this is God. And I could accept it right away because I could understand, you know, people would say, it's in the Bible, God, you know, we are made in the image of God, but we're not God. But the hippies were so confused, they're telling me, oh, I'm God, you're God. When people would say, I'm God, I'm like, oh my God, there's no hope in this world. It's just not something I could accept. But I believe that there was something of higher, now we use the term higher power, something bigger than me, something bigger than all of us. And I didn't know, was it God or not? There was this magazine called Time Magazine, and on the cover it said, is God dead? The black cover with it, is God dead? You know, people were confused. But here came something, you know, here was God. And it was amazing. And when I opened the book, and I'm seeing this Sanskrit, what is that? That Sanskrit, word by word, the transliteration, the translation, and then the purport. Here was something that none of the other so-called swamis or spiritual people have come with. They just had little, like, you know, what they use the word salad. Flowery words of the Vedas. They were saying nothing. And if you asked them a question, you'd become more confused. Here was something substantial, here was something real, and I started to think, I'd like to meet this person, the person who put this book together. And these purports are necessary because we're so dull-headed. We're Kali Yuga, you know, we're victims of Kali Yuga. Our lives are short, our intelligence is compromised. So these purports are like giving us insight into the deeper meaning, the real meaning of the words of the Bhagavatam and the Gita. And then Prabhupada did something else that was really brilliant. Who wants to just sit and read a book of philosophy? He could understand. Kali Yuga just don't have that focus, that attention. The beautiful pictures that were commissioned by Srila Prabhupada of his students. Could be in here somewhere, maybe not in this edition, I don't know. Yeah, here we go. So you can see it in all of Prabhupada's books, these beautiful pictures depicting Radha, Krishna, the gopis, Balaram, the pastimes, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. So Prabhupada said these pictures are windows to the spiritual world. Otherwise, we're hearing Krishna's blue, he's playing a flute, he has a peacock feather, he's like that. But here's a picture, here's what he looks like. And all of the paintings were directed by Srila Prabhupada. It wasn't just they were by his students. It wasn't just that they were an artist. Many of them were not really artists per se, but they wanted to serve, and this is how their service was. And Prabhupada would explain, like this, like that. Krishna's dhoti should be yellow, it should be tied like this. He held the flute like this, you know. That was another brilliance of Srila Prabhupada, to attract our attention and help us understand.
Thank you so much, Mother Malati. please let us thank Mother Malati by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We just have a couple of very quick announcements. After a very long time, we are having a program in Greenwood, Indiana, right? Just say Haribol if you agree. Haribol! Okay. So now that we have again restarted, rebooted these events, let us continue. Next month, in the month of October, we will have His Grace Anuttama Prabhu who's visiting us. Okay, it will be October 19th, whatever that weekend is. So on Friday, again we will have the program over here. It will be a home program in Greenwood, Indiana. In November, most likely we will be having a kirtan, 4-hour kirtan event. That will be November 2nd or 3rd, whatever that Sunday is. I think it is November 2nd is the Sunday. We will have that in Columbus, Indiana. Okay, 4-hour kirtan. And we would like to continue this. So between October and November, there is the month of Kartik, which is happening. So if you would like to have home programs in the month of Kartik in different people's houses, please let us know and we will be happy to arrange that. Okay, so certainly in the month of Kartik, there will be, in addition to Anuttama Prabhu's program, there will be another program. Okay, that's as far as announcements go. Does anybody have any? Yes, on every Saturday, ISKCON Indiana meets in Carmel, Indiana. You can look us up by the address ISKCONIndianapolis.com. Many of us, I look around over here and many of you I see only during Janmashtami, and some of you I see every third Janmashtami. So please try to come a little bit more often, as it will be wonderful to have you. Okay, we will do kirtan and arti. Yeah, there are these wonderful books over here. There are books for children. There are books spiritually. All of these books are spiritually uplifting books. So take a look at this. If you would like to purchase any book, so you can contact Acharya Prabhu over here or Jagannath Prabhu. Our new initiate, Suvala Pran Prabhu. It will take us at least a couple of days to get used to. Please show your beautiful face to everybody, so they know that So this is our new initiate. He just got initiated on Wednesday, like Malati Prabhu was saying. So please bless him. Wish him the very best on his spiritual journey.
Say his name again so everybody hears it again. His new name.
His name is Subala Pran. Subala Pran.
Subala Pran ki
Jai. Okay. Subala Pran Das. Okay.
Also the WhatsApp group.
If you would like to be part of the ISKCON Indiana WhatsApp group, again, contact any of these wonderful souls and they will add you to that group. Okay, we should have some kirtan right now and followed by prasadam. It's literally a 15-minute kirtan followed by prasadam. Okay? Is Vrindavan clear?
Chapatis.
I didn't see Vrindavan.
We got
Okay, I don't see Vrindavan clear, so we normally say for just about 15 minutes. So 15 minutes stops. Okay, I'll only sign up. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine
Namahom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirdishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare
We'll do prasadam prayers real quick. And hey, we have so many kids. Why don't we do Nashinade prayers? And we should keep in mind what Malati Prabhu said earlier in the beginning of our lecture. Her Grace Maharani Devi Dasi. So maybe we can dedicate these prayers on her behalf. Okay. So some of the kids, Pradyumna, would you like to sing Nashinade prayers? Okay.
Yeah. Both of you. Ah, good. Okay.
Just face the deities if you can.
Namaste Narasimhaya. हरी हरी नरसिंह भगवान की जय की जय Srila Prabhupada की जय. So we'll sing the prasadam prayers. You can just follow along or repeat.
It's also there.
Is there? Mahaprasade Govinde Nam Brahmani Vaishnave Svalpa Punyavatam Rajan Vishwasvanaiva Jayate Sharire Avidyajal Jodindriya Tahekal Jive Fele Vishaye Shagare तार मध्य जीवाती लोभामय सुधर्मती ताके जेता कोठिने संसारे कृष्ण बर दयामय गौरी बारे जीव जाय स्वप्रसादन दिलो भाई शयनामृत पाओ राधा कृष्ण गुण गाओ प्रेमे डाको चैतन्य निताय जय निमाय जय निताय जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे महाप्रसादम की
All right. So, is prasadam going to be served outside?
Yes.
Where's Lakshmaya Prabhu?